Prime Minister Mark Carney sat down with Canada's premiers today to discuss the ongoing trade talks with the United States. And on the sidelines, Saskatchewan joined Alberta and Ontario's partnership to build new energy and trade infrastructure such as pipelines and rail lines. All three premiers stressed the need for a pipeline from Alberta to Ontario that's solely on Canadian soil.
It should give us pause that we, in Eastern Canada, are overly reliant on oil that either has to come by way of the United States or has to be shipped in from overseas.
We can't chance it any longer. We need to be independent. We need a pipeline going to southwestern Ontario to one of the refineries and be self-reliant. We can't rely on the Americans anymore. As simple as that.
When European countries learned that they have been entirely reliant for a significant amount of their energy security on Russia, not a country that today they want to be reliant on for that energy security, we shouldn't allow that to happen to us.
I'm joined now by the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. Premier, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here. This is talking about Line 5, right, which goes through Michigan and goes underwater, which the governor of Michigan has targeted. Are you talking about a clear plan to move ahead with the replacement for that?
Oh, well, we definitely need to have the tunnel built for Line 5. I think what we're talking about is a backup plan because it looks to me like Enbridge slowly but surely is making their way through on a replacement on that line, and it's essential that they do that. But it has, I think, caused everyone to realize just how dependent we are, that we don't have an energy east that would have allowed us to be solely reliant or self-reliant. And I think that that's the conversation that we're having, is how can we have energy self-security?
But is this a direct one-for-one replacement for Line 5 that you're sort of talking about there, or is this a separate pipeline that could maybe carry fuel to refineries on the Great Lakes?
It would be a separate pipeline. We'd have to find another route so that we have the ability to bring more oil to Eastern Canada. Potentially, one of the proposals I've heard is have it stop at Thunder Bay, and then you can load it up on ships, and then you'd be able to feed the refineries in the East Coast. But Doug has also talked about the potential for us to have a pipeline route going up to James Bay. And then if you've got icebreakers, you can also find a way to get a route over to the East Coast and onto Europe. So I'm glad we're having these conversations because I think we need to look at multiple different options.
To get from Alberta, you got to go through Saskatchewan. Scott Moe was there. But there's Manitoba between Saskatchewan and Ontario, and Wab Kinew was not there for this today. What's the deal?
I've been so happy with how constructive Premier Kinew has been in talking about wanting to build out this port-to-port-to-port economic corridor is what we're talking about, that would go from about somewhere around Port of Prince Rupert all the way through to Port of Churchill or thereabouts. And one of the things that we're watching as Manitoba goes forward is they're looking at new ways of engaging Indigenous partners. I think that that's one of the aspects that Premier Kinew wants to do, is to get those different mechanisms in place. We have a different way of engaging with Indigenous partners through our Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, where we underwrite loan guarantees for them to purchase into an equity stake. But I think that once he's a little bit more advanced on that, we'll be able to have the conversation with him. But I think he's been very positive about the idea of having an economic corridor and have all types of projects in there, including pipelines.
Yeah, he certainly said this in business group speeches about Manitoba as a partner to get products to Tidewater. He's talked about the Western Economic Corridor, but it's more to the north. This one would be more to the south. Is there a difference, do you think, in the two in terms of Manitoba's tolerance and support?
I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, I would say that the entire country has changed their approach on major projects of national interest. When we did some polling to find out how people felt about pipelines, we saw over 70% support in most provinces, including a majority support in Quebec. And so I would say that people understand the threat of having a single customer, that we need to trade more with each other and support each other. That's part of what our MOUs are about, but also working together to find access to new markets. We'll just be stronger by doing so.
Okay, I know a lot of things have changed. I'm not sure British Columbia's position has changed dramatically. And you mentioned the Port of Prince Rupert, because David Eby, he was asked about this today, and he sort of dismissed the idea of a pipeline to the northern BC coast right now. So just listen to what the Premier of BC had to say. I'll get your response on the other side.
For the pipeline project that Premier Smith is a great enthusiast of, a heavy oil pipeline project, there is no project, there is no proponent, there is no private sector money involved at all that I'm aware of. When Premier Smith crosses those obvious hurdles to get a project done, then let's have those conversations. But to be blunt, we have major projects that are moving ahead, and that's where our focus is.
I'm getting some flashbacks to John Horgan and Rachel Notley.
No.
Should I? I mean,
No.
how optimistic are you with that kind of a comment?
We have so much that we're working on with Premier Eby. I'm so supportive of LNG. The fact that they've now got their first shipment out to Korea, that's fantastic news. We would love to see LNG Canada get to a final investment decision on their expansion. There's at least 3 other LNG projects. Very supportive of all of those. We're working together on trying to get ammonia shipped by rail to Port of Prince Rupert so that we can export to South Korea and Japan. And we're working on an intertie as well, because we think that our substantial wind and solar resources are really good backup for their hydro resources. So there's lots that we're working on together. We know that it's a stage gating, that there are certain projects right now that make more sense to do today, like the dredging of the Second Narrows and optimizing the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which the Premier has been very supportive of, as am I. But there are also, we have to start looking ahead 5 and 10 years. And if this is a window where we can start getting those permits in place so that we can start planning for the future, that's what we're looking towards. When I talk to the pipeline companies, they say every single one of them, the very best option for Canada to expand its markets, have a substantial new pipeline, is a pipeline to the Northwest BC coast. So that's part of the reason we'll be working on that.
Why does it have to be to the Northwest coast and not a further expansion of TMX?
Well, I think we understand and are sensitive to the fact that it's a pretty crowded port. I mean, you have to remember the first time we were talking about TMX, they were concerned about the number of ships that would be going through there because it is a crowded port. There's a lot that's going on there. What I like about Port of Prince Rupert is that they have an expansion plan to try to be, I think, the second biggest port in Canada. We already are exporting propane from there. There's a potential option for LNG from there as well. And it really gives you a clear run to wide open deep sea with an 8-day delivery to Korea and to Japan. There's a little bit more navigation issues the further south that you go. Right. And so that's part of the reason why we're looking at Port of Prince Rupert. We think that's probably the best option.
Okay, going back to what Premier Eby had to say, there is no proponent, there is no project. And you have argued that until federal regulations change, you probably won't get a proponent necessarily because of the uncertainty on the emissions cap and the tanker ban and these things. You've also said that you want a pipeline to be in the first wave of the fast-track national projects. The focus right now is getting C5 to work by building the social license, particularly with the national Indigenous groups. That seems to be the focus rather than changing the regulations. It may be the first wave of projects comes out before they do anything with the regulations. Can you live with that? Because I know this has been a real political flashpoint between you and the federal government. And I based on what they say about wanting projects that are high chance of success and lots of support, I don't know if a pipeline is going to get there by the fall when it starts.
I can tell you that Alberta, as the owner of the resource, we can be one of the guaranteed shippers on that line. Sure. And that's what we did an announcement with Enbridge in January, saying that we're prepared to do that. And we are prepared to do that. And so if we have to help to underwrite a proposal in that way by guaranteeing barrels so that others in the industry are able to have the confidence, that's normally the way pipelines get built, is they line up the producers first. And so the problem that we have is that the producers aren't going to line up as long as there's an emissions cap that would require them to curtail their production.
So the sequencing, though, becomes a problem, right, for you and to meet the demands of the letter you sent. Which
is why I'm asking for those 9 bad laws to be either substantially modified or repealed. And so we're working with, we have a working group together where we're hoping to be able to find some common ground on that. And that's what I am hoping for, that we would be able to have a Northwest BC Coast pipeline with the Pathways project, because I think that that's the marriage that we're looking at. If we can have a lower carbon product going through that pipeline, I think that helps to get the social acceptability. So we're working hard on getting both of those projects on the project list.
Okay, and we'll see, because the timeline and the sequencing will be interesting. But before we let you go, Premier, the August 1st timeline, right? There's varying interpretations on what may or may not happen between now and then, because it all depends on the mood of the President of the United States, which is difficult to predict. Tim Houston and Susan Holt told me they're optimistic. How do you view it?
Well, I haven't checked Truth Social today, so it could have changed in the last few minutes. But the latest that I saw was the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick downplaying the likelihood of an early agreement, talking about a renegotiated Canada-US free trade agreement by next year, which was the timeline. And that's a bit disappointing. I think all of us would prefer to have the certainty, but I'm encouraged by the fact that the personal relationship between the Prime Minister and the President seems to be much improved from the previous Canadian Prime Minister, and so I just want to see the process play out. I know Dominic LeBlanc is planning to head on down to Washington again this week, and so the conversation continues on. We know that there are some particular sectors that are under threat: autos, steel, aluminum, now copper, pharmaceuticals, and maybe a couple of others, certainly timber. And so if we can work through each of those issues, come to some kind of agreement, and then have the larger negotiation around the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement next year, maybe that's the best we can hope for. What I would say is, at the moment, the vast majority of CUSMA-compliant goods are tariff-free, and that's good. It's good for energy, it's good for food production, and it's good for the vast majority of our industries. And so we want to just make sure that it doesn't deteriorate. It's not great that we have a few sectors that are under stress.
But it's deteriorated, since the beginning of the year, right? Even if you get to a point where you guarantee the CUSMA carve-out by August 1, Canada's in a worse position relative to the United States than it was on January 1 because of the sectoral tariffs and the other stuff.
It is true. We figure it's probably about a 5% tariff. So we're in a much better position than most other countries. And so we're trying to make sure that things don't get any worse, see if we can bring down the temperature on a couple of those sector-specific irritants. I think that the Prime Minister has done a good job of meeting the U.S. President where he's at. I mean, he agreed to a 2% NATO target. He's agreed further as well to go for a 5% NATO target, and he also decided not to implement the digital services tax. So I would say that that's a show of good faith. We haven't put in more retaliatory measures. If these are the kind of things that lead to an agreement, then I think his strategy will bear out.
But it'd be nice to see a show of good faith from the United States at some point, wouldn't it, Premier? Don't you think? It's been a lot of give from Canada and not a lot of give back at this point.
I guess, again, the other way I look at it is that the vast majority of goods coming out of Alberta are tariff-free, notwithstanding all the threats that there have been, notwithstanding the fact that it changes on a weekly basis. We do still end up having most of our goods going to the U.S. The tariffs that I hear our businesses complain about are the retaliatory tariffs that Canada has put on. And that's part of the reason why no one really wins a tariff war. It's far better if we can find a way to get the tariffs removed for the benefit of both consumers and in both countries.
Okay, we've got to leave it there. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, I always appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks, David.
Thank you.